Here with me.
Are we there?
All right. Hey, everybody. I just want to welcome you all back for our final lecture of the day. I can't believe the day's passed so quickly. I'm going to give people a second to trickle back into the rooms. And during that time, I just want to do a little mea culpa. I used the wrong gender. Not as easy as it looks. So in describing Matt. So it is not a matter of intent. It is a matter of fatigue. So I will do my level best not to scramble up genders for the rest of the day or the rest of my life for that matter. So with no further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our final and great speaker, Ira Sherman. You know, when I was in my first metals class back in the Stone Age and we rode mammoths into the studio, my professor returned from a snag conference, had no idea what snag was, but he came back talking about this image he saw that apparently somebody during another lecture slipped this slide into the projector, and it was this image of a chastity belt that had something to do with venom. And this was like 1979, and I'll never forget that. And there was something, that's such a powerful image. And that piece was made by our next presenter, Ira Sherman. So it's so interesting to me that I know Ira after just remembering that story for so long. Ira may be best known for his willingness to tackle charged and often uncomfortable subject matter in the form of strangely beautiful and challenging kinetic sculptural devices. The list of publications, lectures, interviews, and collections that feature his work is way too long to talk about here, but it's worth a look on his website. And this is just a trigger warning. This presentation will discuss issues of rape, including rape, sexuality, and anatomy. Joining us from Denver, please welcome Ira Sherman. Ira, it's on you.
Hey. Well, thank you, the Seattle Metals Guild, for inviting me. I'm quite honored, and it's a pleasure to share my ideas and my work with you guys. I have 45 minutes to go through 50 years of a career. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to give a very quick background lecture with slides of jewelry, some monumental metalwork, some mechanical work. And then I'm going to go into three specific exhibitions that I've been working on. One is called Panaceas to Persistent Problems. The other one is called Impenetrable Devices. And the third one is called Sherman Hardcore Chastity Couture. I'll spend more time on those, but without further ado, let me flip the camera around. We'll get the slideshow going, and I'm going to start ripping through these slides here. So what I need to do is we need to share some content, share the screen, start the broadcast. Title of this talk is Revenge, Protection, Redemption, Dystopian Lingerie by Ira Sherman. Here's 50 years in 5 minutes: lyrical line, mechanical design, public art, jewelry design, and liturgical ceremonial objects. I started my career as a jeweler. I worked first in Indian turquoise jewelry, which eventually led to Indian jewelry and gold, which eventually led to fine jewelry. And eventually these pieces, which were probably at the peak of my jewelry career, I was doing these really refined forged gold pieces with gold mesh. The work eventually got into very refined cast gold mesh pieces with precious stones. All of them were sculptures. The way I would design these would be to think of myself as a little ant crawling around the piece of jewelry and looking at it as a sculpture from all different sides. These weren't just baubles. They were designed to be something that could be a monumental if I wanted them to transcend scale. One of the pieces you can see at the Smithsonian in the Renwick Gallery, it's a wristlet that I made in 1986. I do a three-part design system: a forged element, a detailed element, and something in the center that joins the two design elements together. I probably have made thousands of pieces of jewelry over my career. This is how I fund how I wound up living. I had to make a living, and I made gold and diamond and precious material jewelry, sometimes very, very high-end stuff. And I started working with full form jewelry. Charles Luton Brain is one of my mentors, just an amazing guy. And he introduced me to this technique called full forming, which I adopted not just in my jewelry, but in my full form sculptures and eventually into my steel blacksmithing work. These are some full form plates, exactly the same technique is used in this brooch. And the plates are pretty heavy. They're about 10 pounds each and about a foot across. All one piece of metal, folded, formed, folded. Another brooch. I started doing jewelry and full forms in steel simultaneously. My skills as a blacksmith started developing in the late 90s, and I really took off with it and wound up pretty much abandoning jewelry as a direction and going into blacksmithing and architectural work. This is one of my early architectural pieces, liturgical piece for a synagogue in town. Another architectural piece for another synagogue in town, about 9 feet tall, built exactly the way you'd make a piece of jewelry. It's fabricated as a hollow form and then welded in my little shop here. I'm speaking it to you from my studio in my garage, and you're going to see exactly where this stuff was built. I didn't have a computer. We didn't do our designs via computer. We just drew them out on paper and then expanded them, laid them out on the living room floor, and then start cutting the pieces in 1/4-inch bronze. I did some other monumental metal work and monumental sculpture. Collaborated with some people. This is a piece in Chicago. Done some big gates. These are tubular and forged steel. They're about 9 feet high. This is a lobby sculpture for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. I had a really wonderful time doing this and learning more about that organization. These are donor plaques, and as you turn the donor plaque, a figurative form separates from a wheelchair and moves into this path to the cure we titled the piece. There's some of the mechanics that make the sculpture move around. This is the largest mechanical piece I've done to date. It's an RTD sculpture, light rail system in Denver, and actually not too far from my house. And it's 3 different wheels. Each one weighs between 300 and 1,000 pounds. And by turning the ball on the platform there, you can actually get all 3 of those to move kind of like a locomotive's wheels as they rotate. They're just big pieces of jewelry. I look at jewelry as transcending scale. Anything I make in jewelry can certainly be made into monumental metalwork. A bunch of repetitive line motifs. This is a very common way of designing jewelry. This is a Judaica piece. It's called a Ner Tamid, where a laser hits a diamond and scatters sparks of God throughout the whole synagogue. It's really a lovely piece when you see it operate. These are full form pieces. This is a full form Hanukkah menorah. I just love this piece. It's asymmetrical, lots of cool design elements to it. It's about 8 inches across. Another liturgical piece, a hydraulic formed spice box. This piece is in the Vatican, I hope. One of the cardinals there was given this as a gift from the Jewish community in Denver. Here I am working on probably one of the larger pieces of silver, one of the largest silver fabrications that I've ever done. I did it a few years ago for a synagogue in town. It's called the Hoshin, and it goes over the Torah, and it's and this one's done with full form silver. If you look at this picture really carefully, you're going to see there's a lot of prototyping when I do these designs. You're going to see first paper models, and then a whole bunch of full forms in copper, then full forms folded to scale, and then finally the actual silver piece. If I'm going to do a piece in silver, and the silver is going to cost me a lot of money, I want to make sure that I do it right the first time. You also, if you look in this picture, you're going to see some molds, some jewelry molds. I have about 800, maybe more of those things in the shop, and this is how I made my living. Some of you might remember when Furbies took over my life. It was a short period of time, but I wound up gutting them, hacking into their microprocessors, and then making the Furbies run big mechanical devices. That we dressed them up, we skinned them, we did a lot of different things with them. Here's Furby Dominator. Furby runs your thoughts. Here's Furby's frenetic workout. Furby takes you on a bicycle workout, but you can't control it. It's up to Furby totally to give you the routine. Here's a big piece called the Chaperone, which forces, well, it doesn't force anybody. It just keeps people from getting into, might say, sexual indiscretions. Furby controls it all. And when I do these pieces, the bigger mechanical pieces, I always do little prototypes. Barbie and Ken always work really well for some of these prototypes. Here's the piece when it was complete. You can kind of see it from looking down. This is at the Makers Fair in San Francisco a few years back. Another view of the piece. These are big. You can see a duplicate of exactly the same piece on the other side. So 2 people get into this. Now I'm going to move on to panaceas to persistent problems. This is a body of work where the aesthetics are the mechanics are the aesthetics. Mechanized prosthesis that present plausible solutions to unsolvable social problems, such as oververbosity, insincere negotiations, issues of vanity, medical malpractice, rape, confused sperm and sperm banks. I mean, the list is infinite. And I just picked a few out that I thought I'd make a plausible solution to. Early on, I started making these small incineration devices. Here, Andy, this is the venom injection pendant. This is the one you're confusing with the anti-rape device or the chastity belt. But this one injects a venom into you. If somebody you don't like, give them a little gift, and it'll basically take care of them. This is a small animal incineration pendant to when a bug stings you, you can get back at it. This is a vanity device called the preener. It clips nose hair and ears hairs at about 14,000 RPM. It has a zit lancing and squeezing device and also a dental floss dispenser. I got attacked by a tick years ago in Colorado. I came down with Colorado tick fever. I always wanted to get revenge on that tick. So I built this device called the universal, the gasoline powered tick plucker. And it takes ticks off your body at about 40 ticks per minute, has a gasoline dispenser, and everybody knows, you can't squash a tick, so you got to burn it. I was a cross-country skier when I was younger, and I crashed into trees, and I decided to make a sculpture that might do the same thing. This is at the National Ornamental Museum's permanent collection. Ugly handguns. I couldn't adjust to how ugly handguns were, so I wanted to make a beautiful handgun. So I made a working model of a butane oxygen powered handgun that shoots a dart. Then there's confused sperm and sperm banks. You want to do your sperm banking at home? This is the piece. This one is a mechanized giant sperm cell with big long flagellums that are pressurized to about 800 PSI. Anybody getting near this piece, the piece will start to attack them, protecting the precious material it's hiding. And then there's the problem of people who don't negotiate in good faith. And this is called the arbitrator. The arbitrator forces 2 people to negotiate in good faith through a variety of mechanisms. One is people stall for time. It has a built-in timer. People can't get close together. This locks people together in the same room for negotiations. And if they do stall for time too long, essentially it crushes them. Here's some details. Look at this closely. You're going to see every mechanical component in this sculpture is also an aesthetic component. So everything you're seeing here has a mechanical function. And actually in all the pieces I just showed you, almost all the components you see have a mechanical function. It was a challenge I put for myself, and it worked out really well. This is called the Pavlovian trainer. The Pavlovian trainer forces you not to talk too much. It curbs over verbosity. If you try to talk too much, a little bell rings and slaps your mouth shut. Here it is on the body. You notice it's a little chin sensor there. When you talk loud, your mouth opens loud a lot. And when your mouth opens a lot, it hits that little chin sensor and voila, bam, smashes you in the mouth. People don't know what it's like to be an artist. We suffer as artists. We work really hard. We go through all sorts of a whole cathartic system to develop a design. And this is a piece called the explosion injection formula that allows anybody who's not an artist to feel what it's like to be an artist. It grabs you like an idea grabs you. It pressurizes like you're getting intense and you're getting more ideas. And eventually it blows a piece of metal out of your chest, a completed, perfectly formed piece of jewelry. Here I am as a young man when I made this piece, modeling it. And then finally, I want to show this. This is a very important piece in that collection because this leads into what I'm going to spend more time talking about now. This is the piece that Andy was talking about. This is the very first pneumatic chastity belt I made as a piece of jewelry. It really didn't work very well, but the concept, that pretty high concept. The idea was anybody pushing this little tab into the vagina will activate a high pressure air valve and 2 stainless steel darts go into the intruder. This one had some other little clever components like a Samsonite combination lock. Chastity belts really never existed. You'll see them in mythological. It's a mythological concept, something maybe done in the Victorian age by some writer. There's been a lot of research done on chastity belts, and if you look it up on the internet, you'll see they really never really existed, nor could they be used. The chastity belt can be devices of control, confinement, designed to discourage sexual indiscretions. Chastity belts can also be safe and sexy armored fashions of empowerment, anti-rape devices, sexually erotic devices, or even a protective framework for narratives of emotional redemption. There's going to be 3 pieces that we're going to end this talk with, and it's going to cover that topic of emotional redemption. Here's some early chastity belts that some craftsmen decided might work. Impenetrable devices became my first collection of chastity belts. These were anti-rape devices. These were not couture at all. They had to do with interviews with women and men who had been sexual assault victims and what they wanted to see happen to the rapist. Pretty much everybody said identification and apprehension. Some wanted revenge and punishment. Some wanted armored deterrence. Others wanted surveillance. So all these pieces had these themes in the narratives of them were part of each sculpture. The show opened actually at a SNAG conference here in Denver in 2002, and then it eventually had a one-man show at the National Ornamental Museum. This is what the exhibition looks like. It's not on models, strictly the sculptures. These are sculptures, and when you look at them from all sides, they're pretty intriguing. I also have a small picture where you can actually see them on a model. Chastity belts, not chastity belts, I'm sorry. Anti-rape devices is not a new invention at all. There have been so many patents over the centuries, literally, on how to prevent or how to attack a rapist. This is my version of them. This is the high-powered version of the first piece that I made from that previous collection called Panaceas. Here's the business end. It's much more powerful, has longer darts. It's all stainless steel. All the tubes that you see that are blue run high pressure air. This is a piece that injects tattoo dye and a sedative into the rapist. Self-contained 300 PSI air tank. This is the business end. This is a piece called She Had a Good Time, He Did Not. So this allows the woman to have some satisfaction while the guy gets ripped to pieces. This is self-explanatory. Another She Had a Good Time, He Did Not. This is the electric fence. So some people wanted protection. They wanted to be behind a fence. I made a 600 volt fence that goes between your legs. This is a particularly nasty piece where it's called the snare, where a stainless steel loop grabs the guy's penis and pulls it against 2 X-Acto knife blades, basically like a giant rat trap. Surveillance device. These are the 2 pieces that lift people up off the ground to prevent a sexual indiscretion or a romantic indiscretion. These are all stainless steel harnesses. And this is the Vegematic of all anti-rape devices. It's called the Cremasteric Reflex Course. This piece, if you go online and to YouTube, you're going to see that there's a very amateurish video we did with it, but it has almost 1 million views right now. Go figure. It basically dices and chops. Here's some of the mechanics. Again, the mechanics are the aesthetics are the mechanics. Sherman Chastity Couture, protection with style. After I did this first collection, it was very hard for me to market it to museums or to art galleries. It was basically a little too violent and too intimidating for most people and for most of the public. And I also was very intrigued with fashion anyhow. My wife is a fashion designer, and she took me to a few fashion shows during the 90s. And I said, you know, this is really exciting. This is super cool. So I decided to take some of my blacksmithing skills, throw away the whole idea of the mechanics are the aesthetics are mechanics. Focus on safe but sexy is a new message. Empowerment without punishment. And then new narratives for catwalk performances. So these pieces wind up being actual runway performances and runway shows. And then I incorporate a lot of blacksmithing now. Fashion just is so cool, the way that people have been using all sorts of metal, fabrics, plastics, aluminum, paper, 3D printing. It's really gone crazy what you can do around the human body. And it's very inspiring for me. Love this piece. Then I came across Pam Hogg. Pam Hogg does something that gave me permission to do, and that is use nudity and make the body the piece of art along with the piece that's being worn with it. If you look at these pieces, the body is the fashion, and then she adds enhancements to it. I started doing sketches around fashion using techniques, thinking that maybe I can use screen instead of fabric. I can use forged steel for corsets. I can use forged tubing. And I started putting together these real rough pencil sketches, which eventually led to a whole line of couture, of forged out fashions that I called Sherman Chastity Couture. This is an asymmetrical piece called Molinete. I'm a tango dancer, and we have a maneuver where you go kind of in a little spiral twisting motion, where it's kind of like this wonderful circular motion. And I use that motion as an inspiration for this piece. There's a couple of them here, a couple models. Hardcore Sherman Chastity Couture, empowerment with style, inspired by runway fashion designers, safe but sexy message, empowerment without punishment. And there's one of our shows in San Francisco. These were very well received. They're usually fundraisers for arts organizations. As I developed my blacksmithing skills, these type of forms started taking shape, where I would take a heavy piece of forged steel and then add more elegant, light components, curvilinear components. Here's some forged steel components, just arranged. This is not the actual piece, but as I put a sculpture together, I rearrange the components to see what other forms I can get out of it. A lot of you guys as jewelers, I'm sure, do this constantly. Here's one of the first pieces of chastity couture I made. It's all forged steel with a little bit of fold forming on it. And then the area that covers the vulva and vagina, that's all forged out of one piece of metal. It's all full form, it's not cast. It's erotic. It's also technically really difficult to do. Here's the companion piece. This is a chastity belt for a man based on a proboscis mask, a Venetian proboscis mask. Here's a piece on the runway. Another piece on the runway. More runway shots. This is all from the San Francisco show. I've done some shows up by Carbondale Aspen, and these are fundraisers also for arts organizations. And we have some just really enthusiastic people up there, and it's just a pleasure doing runway shows up there. This is a pretty complicated piece. You can look at this one on YouTube also. It pneumatically has a tail that comes up and defends if somebody intimidates this person. And then he has a very similar one, kind of like insects. When you touch an insect, they recoil back. And think of a dystopian world where everybody's afraid, everybody is scared of each other, but yet they still want to have a relationship. They still want to get to know each other. And this is part of the narrative, or I should say the runway story that these two pieces deal with. Here I am doing a little blocking for some of our models. For a male chastity belt, I might be inspired by anatomical drawings, do some real quick sketches. Here's two. I might have done 30 for this next piece you're going to see. And then here's the final piece. This is a flamethrower. It basically catharts male aggression, but he can't rape, that's for sure. But it is a working flamethrower. Here's another proboscis mask. Now I'm using more forged blacksmithing techniques, more forged elements. This, if you look really closely, is another male chastity belt that basically catharts male aggression by masturbating the guy. Once he comes, he's certainly not going to rape very easily. Plus, he's all locked into this thing anyhow. But it's awfully beautiful. It's a lovely piece. Here's the piece that is called Scorpio M1. You can see this functioning if you go on to YouTube again. I have some demonstrations of this actually working. Great model. This piece weighs every bit of 80 pounds, and he just carried it beautifully. It did, like it was like weighed nothing. Here's the front part of the piece. Lots of mechanics on this one, lots of little details and articulating components. Just that gives you an example. I mean, that's just one close-up of a small part of this piece. We're going to talk about some other pieces by the end of this talk, and I'm going to bring you over to the other side of the studio and actually demonstrate one of these pieces. There's Molinette as a sculpture. There's Molinette on the model. There's the back side of Molinette. There's a headpiece. There's a piece that these are headdresses that are just gorgeous. The heads actually have kinetic devices on the tops of them that actually open up. So these mesh pieces fold open if she presses a button right above her belly button. There's the piece in exhibition. I like these pieces better in exhibition than on the models. You can see them from all sides. They're designed to be viewed from all sides, not just from the front or the back. There's the male headdress. Oh, we're doing a show in San Francisco, a little mechanical problem we fixed very quickly in their blacksmith shop. Here's the two headdresses in performance. Stage shot. When I did the show in San Francisco, I made the page of the San Francisco Chronicle fashion section. They did a couple cartoons on my walk, so I figured, wow, that's pretty flattering. I made it, and they did a little caricature of me. That was great. Here's what my shows look like, and this is how I like to see them: is when they're on display with a spotlight on them. People can look at them and consider them carefully from all different angles. It's really a lovely, amazing show with lots of video support. Anybody out there wants to bring my show into your city, call me. I'd love to send it to you. Back view. This is the show of the Hardcore Chastity Couture. Suzanne Ramjak was the author and curator. She did a beautiful job organizing the pieces and making some really good commentary throughout the show. Some of you know this guy. He's my mentor. Charles Newton Brain put me in directions I never thought I'd go, and I'm still loving it. You guys might know this. This is a chastity belt for a catalytic converter, but it's a whole nother story. We'll talk about that maybe later. Protection with redemption. There's three pieces now that I'm going to finish this talk up with. About 3 years ago, I got a phone call from a girlfriend from college. I hadn't talked to her for over 40 years. And she said, Ira, listen, I want to ask for your forgiveness. And I said, for what? And she said, well, I was two-timing you when we were dating. And I go, of course you're forgiven. I mean, everybody was doing stuff like that. But, this is the 60s. And as we started talking more, I remember this lady had been raped by her father. She told me that she had been sexually assaulted by him. And it really bothered me that I didn't know what to make of this, but it set a seed in my head that wound up showing up in a whole collection of work later, which you've just been looking at. Anyhow, so I asked her, I said, look, I want to thank you. You're the one who set the seed that made me start developing this collection of chastity couture. And if you don't mind, I'd like to interview you. And she said, sure. And I said, what would you like to see happen to the rapist, to your father? What can I make that would do that? And she right away said, I'd like to forgive my father. and I like to forgive myself. And I just kind of just, you know, it took my breath away. Like, what do I make? How could I possibly use that in a collection of art? Well, I came up with 3 pieces that evolved from that conversation. One was called E-Detox. The second one was called Heartfelt. And the third one is called Hope. E-Detox, the kidneys I take organs of the human body, I cast them in bronze, and then I put them on a framework of forged steel tubing. The kidneys become the organ that represents cleansing of emotional toxins, of fear, of hatred, of jealousies. And then heartfelt, if you can clear your head of emotional toxins, now you can forgive somebody and you can open your heart in forgiveness. If you can open your heart in forgiveness, now you can accept love again. And the hope is the birth of a child. So here's this first one. Detox starts out with anatomical drawings again. I do some sketches using the vascular system of the human body as a framework, a support for the actual sculpture that goes around the body. Here's the piece finished. This is the back view of it. I didn't show you something early on that I'm going to go back to, and you're going to see these mesh tubular forms. These are called air muscles. And if we have time at the end of this talk, I'm going to demonstrate these because that's how all these pieces kinetically come alive. There's the piece under construction in my studio. I'm standing right in front of this mannequin right now. Anatomically, these pieces have to fit really, really well. They're steel, they don't give. If they don't fit around the human body almost perfectly, they dig in and they're horribly uncomfortable. The way that detox works is what happens is the piece starts opening up, the kidneys open up. When the kidneys open up, there's butterflies inside. The idea, and these are gold leafed butterflies, and the idea is that when you forgive, it's like a weight off of you, and you can go on with your life and be free. These are the bronze kidneys. These are all human, anatomically perfect size. Some little details, little connections, little linkages, more linkages. I love this stuff. And now here's that, see that mesh tubing there with the hose clamps? We're going to talk about that a little later. They're called air muscles. There's the piece on the stand as a sculpture. There's the piece. Oh, none of these have been photographed on a model yet. You know, these were all made during COVID. So I haven't even had a chance to photograph these. They certainly have not been on the runway yet. Okay, the next one was called Heartfelt. I wanted to make a piece where the heart opens up in forgiveness. When it opens up, you see these beautiful gemstones and more gold. I started out with these drawings, anatomical drawings, so some stylized drawings of the heart. I started using the vascular system, the human arteries and veins, and making them in tubing that would support the heart. Added some mesh, more forged components. Tried a few prototype designs, none of them worked. Going back to the vascular system, decided what parts I wanted to bring to the outside of the body to become the framework of the chastity belt. So basically I took the inside of the body and threw it on the outside of the body. And then I made these parts, and these were instrumental to making this whole design work. These are tubular forms that are tapered. You guys have all done them in jewelry, and they're lightweight, but they're structurally incredibly strong. And I can use them as a framework to attach the bronze components of these sculptures. Here's the piece completed on a mannequin. A little bit of scale. Here's the heart. So you can kind of see the heart. The heart's open in this image. And here's the heart closed, but you can see where the hinges are. There's some embellishments with gemstones. And then you see all this tubing coming out of the heart. Well, the heart has not just an aesthetic function, it has a mechanical function. Let me go back to here. So the heart opens up. Inside the heart is a bladder, or you might call it a reservoir, or you might call it a manifold. All the air gets pressurized into the heart and then distributed to the air muscles that make the heart open and close. This is the actual manifold that's I guess set into the bronze heart. Here's some details. These are the tubular components that I was talking about, forging them out of tubing that becomes the structure that these other aesthetic components are added to. This is the part that goes over the hips. They're really lovely. They're wonderful forms. Little corset that's forged out that goes inside those forms. Maybe you can see now, if you look down here on the hips, you'll see the pieces I just showed you. Back view. Very complicated, a lot of moving components, but also all fitting the body beautifully. Lots of adjustments, probably 30 adjustments on this thing to make it work right. Covering the vagina is another mechanized piece that has a ruby inside and it's sterling silver. The idea is that if you could open your heart up and forgiveness, you can open your body up in love again. So this is how the piece will probably look once I get it on the model. A little backup here for inspiration. Giger, amazing stuff, just biomechanical work. Soriyama, more biomechanical stuff. Final piece I'm going to show you. Hopefully we'll have time to do it. I'm going to rip through this real fast so we can go look at the actual piece operating. This is the piece called the Hope, based on the female reproductive system. Inside, covered by this armor belly, is a baby inside a uterus, a vagina that's open with little sperms coming up into it. All this is protected in a mechanized shell, and that goes into the front of the woman. That's the back view. Under construction. I do these designs by going into the musculature of the human body, tracing it, defining what parts I want to extrapolate, forging out elements that fit, and then start building, working on special mechanical components later. A lot of these things aren't anything close to what I originally conceived, but they evolved beautifully. Back part of the piece, forged out tubing, all tubing, everything here is tubing. Here's the piece finished. Back part of the piece. All these pieces are made up of many other pieces that all by themselves hold very strong as a sculpture. Very sculpture components all put together. It's like making 100 pieces of jewelry. That's like making 500 pieces of jewelry and then reassembling them into one sculpture. And here's what it would look like on the body. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to walk over and take a look at this sculpture. I'm going to flip the camera around here, give you a very quick, let's get out of here. Okay, I'll give you a very quick tour of my studio. Here we are. This is where all the bigger stuff is made. I also have a jewelry studio inside my house. Andy asked me to show you guys hammers. So here you go. Here's some of the hammers I use in blacksmithing. You can't have too many vice grips when you're a blacksmith. This is a treadle hammer, power hammer. Handmade, homemade. They work great. Here's the welding department. The forge. And these are all the dies I use for forming metal to the human body. Every one of these fits different radiuses on the human body. Bandsaw. This is where I do all my tool making, tool sharpening. You can't make tools. You can't make really good art. So tool making is super important if you're a maker. Every day I'm making a different tool to get a certain form to look the way I want it to look. Then you come over here, it's the machine shop. Got a 3 horsepower milling machine because I do larger work than just things that go on the body. Got a lathe. Gearhead drill press. And if you come over here, you're going to see the new piece right here. So let's get this thing fired up. Hold on a second. It's getting hung up.
Oh, there we go. We're good.
Sorry, Ira, you're muted. There you go.
Okay. So here's the front of the piece. I'm going to start with the back. The back of the sculpture reaches out to the audience, reaches out saying, look at how beautiful I am, like a flirty dress. It has little things that attract attention. But now she's pregnant and something much more important is happening. Now a baby is growing inside of her. And the baby needs to be protected, and all her attention goes from the back to this flirtiness into the uterus, into where the baby is. And the baby's protected by this armored belly. The piece is heavy. It's not as elegant and light as some of the other pieces I've done. And we're going to bring the camera in underneath it. And you'll see where the uterus and the baby is. Hold on. Most of this piece you have to explore. You don't see it right away. And the idea of the kinetics is contractions. Think of it as birthing contractions. As you look up here, you'll see there's lots of little hinges, little levers. Here's a pneumatic cylinder that opens up and pushes against the levers. Again, as a jeweler, I'm putting embellishments of gemstones on the piece. Lots of linkages, little more connectors. The shoulders push down as she's pushing. What makes this super cool as a mechanical piece is it's all tubing. Everything you see here, everything mechanical that is actually moving is forged out of tubing. It's the first time I made mechanical devices that weren't machined out. And I have a hunch I'm running short on time here. So let's stop this. And we're going to move back to the I'll walk back to where I started the talk. How are we doing on time? Are we pretty much out?
We're doing okay, Ira. You've got, if you want to have questions, I'm trying to do the math in my head. You've got like 8 minutes without questions. If you want to do questions, we need to cut it down a little bit, but that's really up to you.
Okay, well, I got these air muscles. If you want to see those things operate, what do you think?
Yeah, we want to see the air muscles. Air
Okay,
muscles.
want the air muscles. Okay, so now you know what the air muscles are. Here they are again, right? Here's four different types of air muscles. They're incredibly powerful. They're just lovely when you're designing curvilinear forms around the human body and you need kinetic motion. They allow you to give kinetic motion with curvilinear design. So let me pressurize these guys. And so you can get very quick motion with it. You can get very slow depending on how much air you allow through a valve. And they're quite powerful. I mean, these things when they expand, you can't possibly keep them together. You know, I mean, they probably pull at about 400 pounds. Let me show you something else here. While these are doing their thing, I wanted to show you these really quick. These are pieces of tubing that are cut on angles, which are used in all my sculptures. Some are pretty heavy, like this one here. I can easily weld on this, easily tap on this, and forge it hot or forge it cold. But pretty heavy material, or very delicate. Okay, guys, I think I've talked enough. Got any questions?
Yeah, we do. Ira, that was wonderful. Those air muscles, I had to mute myself. I was just laughing out loud. They're just so hilarious. They're like sausages that are alive.
They're really a lot like muscles. The way the muscle contracts,
right.
They really do behave like that. It's pretty remarkable.
So one of the questions is, are you making these pieces for specific people? I mean, I guess the question is, are you tailoring them? Are they being tailored to specific bodies? I mean, I make rings that fit me all the time, just in case I have to own them still.
Most of them, I have one male mannequin and one female mannequin. And almost all these pieces are formed around that size. Some of them do have adjustments, so I can handle different size bodies. But to answer your question, no, these are not universal by any means.
So I think I asked you this during the dress rehearsal, but are the pieces, they're steel. So when they first go on the body, they must be incredibly chilled, right? It must be cold.
That is the biggest, if models have a complaint, and usually they're quite empowered and really love wearing the pieces, but if they have a complaint, it's that first, woof, this is cold. Yeah. So, but it warms up quickly and you get used to it. I put them on and they're cold. And
what, the subject matter is pretty well charged, especially in this day and age. And I'm wondering what pushback you've gotten against some of these. I mean, a lot of times people don't look below the surface to the intent. They just see the word rape or whatever, and they just react. So I'm sure there's been reactions to this work.
Yeah,
over the course of your career.
Okay, almost I'd say 95% of the comments have been, God, I wish I had something like this when this happened to me, or amazing work. Most of it's very good, but I do get periodically I get a comment that says, how dare you capitalize on rape? How dare you make fun of rape? How dare you make art out of rape? I don't know. I listen to anybody who's talking on any presentation who's an artist. They're taking some pretty serious topics. Yes. Mine happens to be almost plausible. There's like a plausible reality to the pieces that confuse people.
I mean, it's challenging subject matter. I mean, on so many levels. I mean, it's a lot for people, I think, to go through the layers and process. Here's a real softball, and just out of curiosity, I was curious too. How many square feet is your shop? Because it's pretty concentrated.
It's a 3-car garage, basically, a real small 3-car garage. 3 small
minis or something.
Yeah, it's pretty small. Well, 3 small cars. Yeah.
I was struck by something, and this is going to lead us actually into the Q&A for the panel. But you said you approached the work as a jeweler. Getting size out of small elements, which is certainly, I think, how and Junko was doing a very similar thing, taking small elements and creating this, if not mass, well, definitely mass, but volume out of these things, which is, it's just a really it's a great comment that you made, because I think it allows people who are working on a smaller scale an easy path towards expanding that scale.
I have a friend who's an architect. who has built some really big stuff. And we collaborated on a couple projects, and we started talking design. And he said something to me that has always stood with me. He says, design is design is design. It doesn't matter whether you make it, in the head of a needle or if you make it 30 feet high. It's good design is good design, good concept, good narrative. It all is valid. So I would never narrow a great piece of art down to scale, to any particular scale.
So you were talking about, some of this work's a big piece of jewelry. Have you thought, do you see things around you, either on the architectural plane or whatever, that can be scaled down to jewelry?
Yeah, some of it. I'm inspired by some things I see. Right, that's in my past, actually. Right now, I'm focusing on the last group, Chastity Couture. These are pieces that fit and interact with the body. So anything that I see, it'll probably be some fashion show. It'll probably be something I see somebody wearing that might inspire me to move into some form that maybe I haven't explored, or some narrative I haven't explored before.
So I've got one last question before we move on, and of course it's a huge one. What's next?
Wow, that is a big one, because the last three pieces pretty much ends it. I start out with this revenge and vengeance, and then I go into this kind of safe but sexy thing. Yeah. And finally we get into a redemptive quality of hope. The baby is the hope for life, is the hope for the future. Without a baby, there's no hope. And where do I go now? I don't know.
Well, listen,
help me out, guys. Give me some suggestions.
I think it's a good question for the panel, for everybody, including Cindy. What's the next book? What's the next challenge? What's the next hill to climb? So that was fantastic. And I've seen it twice, and you did change a couple of things, which is pretty great. I want to thank you, and you're sticking around for the panel.
Yeah, you want me to just stay tuned here, right?
No, we're going to have to sign into the next one.
Okay.
So it's its own individual webinar, which brings me to the point that we have reached the last lecture. I cannot believe that we are wrapping it up, but there's still one more thing to do, and that's everybody together in one room. So you have a few minutes, grab yourself a beverage, kick off your pants, put your pants on, whatever pants situation you want to find yourself in, and sign in for the last webinar. We'll see you at the crack of 3 p.m. Pacific, whatever it is for you, the next top of the hour.
See you guys later.
Thanks, Ira.
You're welcome.